Okay, I think it has already started. So the topic which we are trying to cover today, okay, is about Struts Tag Libraries, whatever you saw in the registration.jsp. So essentially the idea is that you have a GSP page, and there, if you remember the mini MVC project which we are working mostly on uh, by using the HTML tags. So HTML as such also provides you many tags such as form, colon, input, input tag, etc., etc. Which, I mean, if you even if you write plain HTML pages, you require them. Okay, but if you want to invoke or like put in Struts framework, I mean, you can go ahead and start using the Struts tag libraries for it to like, I mean, like, say if you want to invoke form from the using struts tag, you can use s colon form, the one which you are seeing here in this particular example, right? So we have s colon form. The thing is that even if in this particular assignment or work, if you would have used form colon action like whatever was there for HTML, it would have worked fine for you. Okay, the only thing is that internally this data will always be calling the same data as whatever was there for form colon action itself. So, but there is some additional stuff. So when you're using struts, it's always better to use struts tags. And then the second part which we discuss is how the data flows from JSP to controller, a bit of which we have already uh, discussed here, and I mean it was covered last time as well. So, and this is what we discussed in the assignment as well. So there is no much change. Mostly we'll be covering on Struts tag libraries. Okay, so let's go into them one by one. The Struts tag library is basically, I mean, as you had understood, it's a library of tags. Okay, and tags such as s colon form, s colon text field, s colon password, etc., etc. So for different functions, you have different kinds of tags. So for the UI display, you have different tag. For action, you have different tag. So the tags, I mean, there are different tag libraries which have been created depending on the function which is required to be done. Okay. Now say you have one include tag. So what that include tag does is it's same as JSP colon include. So remember what we discussed during our JSP session. It's the same work which this particular tag does. It includes one JSP into the other JSP. And this is how it is. See, so there are three stuff here. One is either you can use only like s colon include. You can get the value as whatever JSP file you want to include. The second way is that you include the JSP file and you also pass some parameter value with it. Okay, and this parameter value is accessible on the JSP which you have invoked. Okay, so these parameter values can be used there. The third syntax is to include the JSP and put values like this. So if you see the difference between the second syntax and the third syntax is that the value is kept outside this tag. Okay. So basically the idea is that say the value is configurable. If the value is a constant, you can just put it like this. If the value is configurable, I mean let's put it like this. I mean from the JSP page at runtime, if you want to get that value, let's put it outside. So that's what the third syntax will cater to. Okay. So second syntax includes myJSP.jsp and the value being passed to myJSP.jsp are what was mentioned here, param1 and param2. Okay. Now again, as I was saying, these values are constant. If you want to give runtime values, you should use option 3. In fact, there are cases where you can use option 2 as well for passing dynamic values, but you'll have to use scriptlets. If you remember, we had that less than bracket, then percentage symbol, and equal to. So that was a scriptlet part which we discussed in JSP, and using that also we can do. But what's the need? I mean, you have an additional way to achieve the same functionality. So there is no way to like hand your nose by an opposite way, right? If you have a straight way to do it. So that's how it is. Now let's move forward. Any questions till now? Are you guys okay? Guys, I need responses. Even if it's quick ping, I don't mind, but keep on pinging, okay? So the action class. So this is action class. This is similar to the registration action, which we thank you RP, which we discussed. I mean earlier. So again, if you see, There is one attribute username, getter and setters are there, and you have one execute method, and from there you're returning the string success. Alright, and then this is a particular action class. Now let's go back to the JSP page which we are using. Okay, so we see the JSP page. What is there? I mean, it is a typical HTML page, and within that you'll be using the struts tags, and this is how it is done here. S::include output.jsp, passing the value as param1 value 1, param2 value 2. Okay, so you're including output.jsp. So let's see output.jsp. So output.jsp is this one, and the thing is that we're passing two values from there, param1 and param2, and those values are accessible here. Okay, so you have param1 using this dollar symbol. You can go ahead and pass whatever values you are setting from there. So those values are available here as well. Okay, so this is how you include the JSP. And in the struts.xml anyways, I mean, you have to I mean, there's nothing much which has to be done for including the struts tag. It's already there in the struts-core .java, so you do not have to do anything special. If you see, this is the package name. Anyways, this is not very important. This is just for modularization. We have put it. We're extending the default package, and this is the action class. And typically, action class we're including the include tag.jsp, and this is the same JSP from where we are including the output.jsp file. Okay, so that's how the entire thing works out. Okay, are we good till now? Okay, thank you. Yes. So now the second tag which we want to discuss is, okay, s colon. Yeah, thank you, Shravan. The second tag which we want to discuss here is s colon bean. So s, if you remember, what is s? Do we always need to use s? Right? I mean, what is this s? Can't we use t? Can't we use something meaningful? And we can. I mean, the thing is that this is a normal convention. That's how it is used. I'll show you how to, I mean, change this prefix, but I mean, there's nothing much to it. I mean, it should not even bother you. So the other tag is bean tag, okay, and you give the name of a class. Okay. Now the class name, if you see this particular example, is from Apache or Apache struts to util counter. This is used for doing the counting. Okay, and when you put the var as counter, var is basically in case of JSP also this var was present if you remember. The var is basically if you are running a sort of a loop, say from 10 to 20, 100 to 500, var maintains the intermediate status, intermediate value of that particular counter, whether it is, I mean, in this case, we are running from 20 to 25. When in a particular loop the counter value is 20, 21, 22, whatever be the case, that is being decided from here. Okay, and that status is saved here. And this is, it's not necessary to use Apache's class. You can, this is a placeholder to use your own Pojo. Pojo stands for pure old Java object. In plain and simple English, it's a normal Java file. Okay, that is what you can put here, and inside that you can do your own work. So it should be available in the class path. You use bean, you create it, okay, and then you start using it. So let's go through whatever text we have here. So these bean tag instantiates a class that conforms to the Java bean specification. This tag has a body which can contain a number of param elements to set any immutator methods in that class. That basically means that all these parameter things which are there. The var attribute is set on the bean tag. It will place the instantiated bean onto the stack's context. Okay, so I mean, again, what that basically means is that this is accessible using this particular name. So using counter, you can access whatever is out there, and it is available for you in the JSP page to use. Okay, so this is the use of the bean tag. Are we clear till now? Guys, are we okay till now? What would others? Anyone who is not okay? Let me ask a question the other way. Anyone who is not okay?
What's the Java Bean specification?
Yeah, Java Bean specification is basically, I mean, for everything, Java has already defined a set of rules how it has to be. So again, for this one also, it has defined how your Java Bean should be. So Java Bean is nothing but a Java file which stores some of the values. So I've not looked into the specifications myself, but any Java class satisfies that particular bean structure. I think the basic requirement there is that you need to have attributes, and if you have getters and setters, the way to access attributes from that particular uh, class, okay, then you're following that Java specification. You do not look into anything else. So again, to repeat, you need to have attributes like say private string first name, private string last name, private string username, private string password, and then for accessing this username, password, etc., which are basically private attributes here, we need to have getters and setters. So if you have getters and setters, the idea is that there is one reflection API in Java. So reflection is basically that in the starting itself, I do not know that the class which I'm going to work is called as registration. So I might know during runtime that I need to invoke say com.abinternational.registration class. So that is the case, and I have to set the values. How do I find all these values? And even how do I instantiate the class? If at runtime I get this string saying that this is a name, and do not get confused. I'm just trying to make you understand the Java specification and why it is there. So if you get this name, you instantiate this class. So how do you instantiate this class? Because you just have a string. The string name is com.abinternational.registration. So using that string, you can't go ahead and instantiate the class, right? So what is being done is that Java uses reflection APIs to instantiate that class for you. And again, for setting all the individual attributes, it finds them dynamically and sets it. Now for doing that, the way in which this entire framework works is that whatever be the attribute name, it tries to find a setter from one side, like from the place from where you're trying to copy data, and the place you're trying to set the data, there has to be the place from where you're trying to get the data, there has to be a getter. The place where you're trying to set the data, there has to be a setter. So that's how it gets the details and sets the details. So if you have getters and setters for all the attributes which are there, in that way, you can use reflection APIs to copy details from one place to the other place, from one Java bean to the other Java bean, and that is the basic Java bean specification, which is already defined from the Java folks. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, so that's the model part.
That is, in our case, the model part, yes. But the thing is that you can be using some other objects as well, right? So inside that same JSP. So if I go here and say this registration.jsp, apart from this, for rendering some of the data, or maybe the success.jsp. So for rendering some of the data, you might be requiring some of the stuff, okay? Or maybe you are trying from here itself to create that registration view. For doing that, you need to go ahead and just write like say s colon bean and then uh, s colon bean and then give the name of like whatever class you're trying to instantiate and then populate it accordingly. And then later on, you can in the same JSP file, maybe via scriptlets or whatever you want to access that data. So there's a need for that data which you want to store in the form of a pure old Java object. So in that way you can go ahead and access it. Okay. But registration action satisfies your bean criteria, Java bean criteria. But it need not be an action class, it can be anything else. Does it answer your question?
Yeah,
Any other questions, guys? Okay, so let me move forward. So we have this date tag, and again, for dates also, if it, there are various ways to format a date. It can be in DD, YYY format, or the month can come first, or you do not need year with like 4, you only need with 2, or you need like 05 hyphen MON, I mean basically 05 hyphen OCT hyphen 2014. So such things can be there. There are different ways to represent the same date, and if not provided, it is not, as far as I remember. I haven't gone through HTML5, which is the latest specification from HTML side, but there is no such HTML tag which does this formatting. I mean, we never used it. So the idea is to use, if you use a date tag, you'll save a lot of your headache. Otherwise, you'll have to do the same work yourself. Okay. So, let's see how it works. So you have s colon date. You give the name. This person is basically a Java bean. So earlier you would have defined somewhere that there is one Java bean. Okay, and inside that there is one attribute birthday that you are using, and which is basically a date. So you give it here, and you know that since it's a date, you have used not any text field etc., but you have used s colon date. And when you have used it, you can define the format as such, like what is the format you want. So in this case, the format is the first one, ddmyy, or you have some other formats. All right. So that's how, I mean, the date format works. So these date tags, as I mentioned, will allow you to format a date in a quick and easy way. You can specify a custom format like whatever is highlighted here. Okay, something of that sort, or you can have some predefined formats as well, which is defined with the key struts date format in one of the like default struts properties file, uh, and if you want you can like override it as well. So this is all about date tags. Coming back to UI tags, again, I mean, they are for rendering various types of data on the UI. If we remember the registration.jsp, which we are discussing right now, we have s colon text field, we have s colon password, etc., etc. There, I think also about the UI tags only, but we'll see in details here. Okay, so struts to UI tags is simple and easy to use. You do not need to write an HTML code. UI tag basically generates it for you, and you, in fact, this also you do not need to know that it generates it for you. Just use it, and slowly you'll get a hang of it, and you will never understand even the concepts which are used at the back end, because it is, I mean, very much helpful. So by the default, this seems particularly XHTML theme is used, and is again, I mean, that is just for understanding part. It's not used as such anywhere. You do not have XHTML knowledge, etc., for doing this. Okay. Now let's see. This is a particular example which I have put here. This is the JSP page which we have to design. We need to have a username, password, gender. We need to select a country. There's a text field where you can write about yourself, like what you think, and maybe that is a requirement. And then you have the community, like which all communities you need to join, whether you need to join only Java or .NET or SOA. SOA basically stands for Service Oriented Architecture, or you want to get regular emails, etc. So there are check boxes basically, there are text boxes, there are drop downs, there are what do you say? I mean, only one can be selected. Then you have normal text fields, and then you have submit. So it basically covers the entire gamut of things which is required. This particular JSP on a high level. Okay, so let's go below and see. Now this is the JSP page which is out here. See, now here first of all, again you would have seen in the class, sorry, in the registration.jsp which I was showing, when s colon form was the way in which you plug in your action class. So whenever the page gets submitted, when you click on submit, I mean, this is the action class which is mentioned here is being called. And again, to draw a reference to make you recap, this action class entry will be there in the struts.xml. The name of the file has to be struts.xml. Struts.xml has to be in the class path. I mean, if you have a typical project structure which was not, I mean, in that case, it should be inside web-classes, web-inf/classes folder. Once you compile your project, it should go there. But in our case, we had build/classes folder, it is going there. It is working fine, because the idea is it should be there in the class path. Alright, nothing else is required. Now going below, we'll get the UI tags as such. So you have, if you have text field. So if you need a text field, what you do in the case of normal HTML tag is you use input tag. You put input type as text, right? So you use in that way. Here you can directly say s colon text field, give the name, give the label. Label is basically how it should like be shown there. And then you have s colon password, and then they have radio button for the gender, where you have to select either male or female. That thing you can use s colon radio. And you can also use the values, like whatever has to be shown there. Like first has to be male, then you show male, then you have female, then you write female here. Okay, and this is how, see here it is, you have male and female. So the way to do is s colon radio, you give the name and you give the value list where you have male and female. So and like Struts 2 framework will take care of it. So this has simplified the work a lot. Otherwise earlier we used to write the same thing in two lines and give one default value as well. So I mean default value is like which one should be checked from beforehand. So all that work had to be done, but it has got simplified a lot more right now. So the life has become a bit easier for developers, a bit easier. But anyways, this is how it works. So you have s colon radio, you give the name, you give the label, you have a list. List is basically the number of radio boxes, radio buttons you need to show. Like in Argus, you have male and female. You have hundreds also. I mean, it will affect the way in which it looks, but ideally there is no restriction on the number as such. Then from the country, if you remember, there was a drop down. You can select India, USA, UK, whatever. For that, you have S colon select. The name is going as country, and this is the name which binds the JSP page with the action class, the model data which was there. I mean, by using reflection, I mean, the struts framework directly converts. I mean, uses this data, gets it from the request, HTTP server request, and then saves it, assigns it in the action class which you're discussing. All right, and then here you have the list is a country list. Okay, and then it mentions what all things which are there. So country list would be defined somewhere else. So the thing is that this list as country list in the same JSP, I mean there will be a place where you have defined the country list, or the action class from where you are rendering this page, at that time itself you set that country list and use it here. Okay, so list key is country ID, list value is country name, and it basically means that what's the key value pairs which you are using from this, I mean whatever value which is coming in. Okay, so the details will see, I mean how this select works. And then they have text area. So text area is basically a free form. In the case of HTML, you have input type is equal to text area, and that's how you use it. So that is the text area which was there in the case of HTML. This is how we use it in the case of struts too. And the checkboxes. So the difference, and I think you already know, I'm just reiterating for maybe myself. So here you have checkbox, and the difference between checkbox and the radio boxes, that in radio box you can only select one, in checkboxes you can select multiples. So again you have s colon checkbox list, you name from wherever you want to like use that list. I mean whatever things you want to mention, the community list. Again like country list, that community list will be pre-populated, and then you have the name and the label for it, and then again whether you want to join the mailing list or not, that's a separate checkbox altogether, because it was in a different like boss and you wanted to keep it as separate. That might be an idea, but you can club everything together also, that's not a problem. Okay, and then you have the label, would you like to join our mailing list. If you want to give something else would be displayed. Okay, so the earlier what you would have done and what I would have done if I would not be using the struts tag is, would you like to join our mailing list. So I'll be having one line as input type is equal to checkbox. Okay, and then give the value which will bind the data from the JSP to the servlet or to the action class, whatever you say, to the controller, let's be clear. And then the next line I will be having just this text, would I like to join our mailing list. Then I'll use the div tags etc to place them properly. Okay, now the thing is that you are saved of that kind of 2-3 lines hassle. You can directly mention the label of whatever you want to display, and then the name of the attribute, the way in which it binds the JSP and the controller, and you're done. So your code is simplified to a lot more extent. Okay, now coming back to the next page, which is success page. Okay, so again the success page basically is nothing. What it does is that it has this s colon property, and then you're displaying it. So s colon property is nothing but whatever is there on the stack, you just display those values. Okay, So I mean that is what is out there. So what the action class by default is there in the stack. You need not mention it specifically. So if you write sql property value is equal to username, and if you see here none of the beans or any other classes we have defined, that's because the action class which was related to this particular JSP page, I mean using that package name and the action class, and from wherever this result came in, you must be having one action class reference. So wherever that action class reference came in from, I mean that is already there on the stack. Okay, so in other words, you can get those values, get attribute values from there without specifically writing or saying that this is a particular class from where I need the data. Okay, so that's how your property tag works. So the thing is that it gets all the values from the stack, and some of the values you need to put in the stack, but some of the values are available by default. The action classes, you need not worry about it, it is present by default. Okay, so that's how it is. Okay, so I was trying to look and see, but the thing is that I have not put that particular Java class which has this thing. But the thing is that this value, right, the country list, the same value you can set in the action class itself. Okay, and if you set in the action class itself, right, that action class is available here as well. So that's how the data gets pre-populated. So basically there would be one attribute in the action class named as country list. There will be one attribute community list, and those attributes would be available for you to use inside the JSP page which is out there. So I mean that is the case. I'll recommend like you whenever you like you're working on it. I mean like just go through it, and if you have any questions, ask me. Okay, we like in the struts basically has three classes. One was for the introduction, one is some advanced version, and the third one is about sort of a recap where we're discussing about the struts as such, the validation which you can use with struts, etc., etc. So there will use these tags to cover one of the assignments. So it will be one of the assignments, and to do it I need like some help from you guys, in the sense that I mean you have to do it, because other than that, I mean if there is nothing, no working version to work on it, then it's going to be difficult for you and us at the same time. Okay, let's see, someone ping me. Correct. Action class will be executed after submit. So once you click submit, this I mean the control goes to the server. Okay. And the thing is that see, when you click on submit and the control goes, till that time the server doesn't know that which action class has to be called, or whether it's from struts framework, right? So it goes, and in typical web application, whatever code you have, the first thing which gets the know of what needs to be done is web.xml. So using a particular URL, you see that what needs to be done. In our case, you know that struts prepare and execute filter, whatever we have defined as a filter class, needs to be executed. Once executed, it calls struts.xml to see that this is the action name I've got in the request. What is the action class which has to be used? And that's how you get the reference of the action class. And once you get the reference of action class, I mean the execute method is called. And once the execute method is done, you pass over a string. That string is basically used to find out the JSP page which has to be rendered, and that JSP gets rendered. Okay, so this is how the entire flow works. And yes, you're right, Suhas. I mean, after click, the action will be called. Before not. After click or submit, action will be called. When you're loading also, if you remember here, I mean, in this particular case, I mean, there is no submit button. There is only the URL registration/work/welcome.action. So in this case, once you hit this particular URL, at that time the outcome is that this page gets rendered. At that time there is no submit button as such, but still the action class is called. Why? Because once you hit this URL, we hit the when the once the request hits the server, from the web.xml we find the reference to struts.xml. From struts.xml we find what action class has to be executed, And if there's no action class defined, we just use the action support as a default action class. And what it does is basically forward a request to whatever JSP have defined with the name as success. Okay, so that's how your the first page gets rendered. And once you fill out the details, click on submit, then the next action class comes into the picture. Yes, so the thing is that if you want to pull in some values, then what you need to do is that the action class which you have defined here, I mean, here you're not defining an action class, right? Define that action class, and inside that execute, set up some of the values. Like say, if you want to set up first name, set it up. If you want to set last name, set it up, and use that same stuff here, and use a success, and the registration.jsp gets loaded up. When the registration.jsp gets loaded up, I mean, because of the same name as there in the case of, uh, as in the case of action class, the values will be pre-populated. So that's how you get the reference to the data which is in the action class, and you can pre-populate data as well. Okay, and we can, I mean, yeah. So that's how it is. Did I answer the question? Okay. So the thing is that uh, there is a concept, and we will be like seeing it in this particular part. It's called as value stack. But for now, let's understand that you have, uh, we have, I mean, the data. Okay. Now this data corresponds to a particular action class. Okay. If the value is pre-populated, that is, if you already have a value, that value will be shown. In our case, there is no value as such. Once we were like loading this page, it did not get shown. The first of all, I mean, second of all, the thing is that the the page which we are trying to hit is uh, localhost colon 8080 slash registration slash work slash welcome dot action. So if you have slash welcome dot action, and if you have defined your own action class, like say welcome action. So if we have this welcome action, then what you will do is that that welcome action might be we have to define the attributes, like say first name, last name, username, and password, and that value inside this welcome actions method, execute method, you can set some of the values. Like say you can say the first name is equal to Abhishek, last name is Singh, etc., etc. Now, if you do that and you render this JSP, and since all these attributes which are here are supposed to be one-to-one mapping with whatever is out there in the registration action, and if that is the case, this particular text field which will be shown will be pre-populated with the data which you have set in the welcome action. So, I mean, that's how it gets rendered. Did it get answered? I mean, did you understand, Suhas? Okay, so like, so this pre-populating part, we'll do an assignment and we'll see. Okay, but anyways, like this is a basic concept. Let's do a assignment. And okay, and the thing is that guys, if you do not work with assignments, like we'll like in the class timings itself, we'll start working on it. I mean, I'll give you that. Let's work on this assignment. You'll work on it, and then we'll discuss. So working on the assignment is very important because I mean, without that, like we're not going anywhere. Okay, so let's move ahead. So in Struts 2, value stack is a place where data is associated with processing the request is stored. So all the form properties will be stored on the value stack. The name attribute of the UI tag is the one which links to the property on the value stack. So the idea is, again, I mean, there is sort of a stack. Stack is a sort of data structure. Struts is using this value stack internally. What it does is that all the values which are required in a particular JSP page, and if you have set it like say in an action class, etc., it puts the data on that particular stack. So you can also set it like if you use s colon bean, that bean name, that bean data goes on the stack itself. Okay, so it's not that only form data can go, any data can go and it can be used later on. Giving that v name, or if the action class is there, if you have set data from the action class, that v name itself is also not required. Okay, so you can use that value. I mean, we all you use, if we are using the struts tags, we all use that value tag. Sorry, that value tag. The only thing is that we do not specifically ask for it. It is used by the framework as such to get the data which we require. Okay, so say if you have this particular text field, right? The text field name as username, the label as username, the value is Abhishek. I mean, this value as whatever is there will be stored on the stack also. Okay, and how it is stored on the stack is that in the welcome action, if you remember, if you set the first name is equal to Abhishek, it will like while it will go in the value stack. Okay, and once it goes in the value stack, I mean, even if you do not write it here, that value will be pre-populated. So that's what we were discussing before. Now coming to how it uses it, how the value structure is used. I mean, the concept which is behind, and again, this is just theoretical concept for you to understand what is working on the back end for it. But I mean, there's no need for you to understand in much more detail because practically you might not be using it that much, apart from few hashtags here and there. But still, I will suggest that you try to understand this as much as possible. And if you have any questions, then ask me. If you want to do any pre and post reading, then I mean, you're more than welcome to do that, right? So let's move ahead. The object graph navigation language is a powerful expression language that is used to reference and manipulate the data on the value stack. So if you put the data on the value stack, you need a way to get data from the stack itself, right? So stack is basically like you have one data on top of it, you have another data on top of it, you have another data. So that is what basically a stack is. Okay. So OGNL, which basically is Object Graph Navigation Language, provides you a way, okay, to get data from the stack. Okay, and the language which they use, I mean, this is a language, so it's similar to JSP expression language. Okay, and OGNL is based on the idea of having a root or default object within the context. The properties of the default or root object can be referenced using the markup notation, which is a pound symbol. So basically, I mean, there is a root object, and then you have a number of objects which are assigned to it. Okay, so whatever values you set from the action class, whatever bean tags you use, all those data gets assigned to this root tag and in a form of a tree, and we can access details from there. Okay, so OGNL is based on a context, and Struts builds an action context map for use with OGNL. So Struts basically creates an action map, which is sort of a hash map. It associates with this particular root context, and when you say map, you have key value pairs, right? And if you have key value pairs, then using hashtags, etc., we can retrieve those key value pairs and go and do our work. So the idea is that we need not specifically write that this is the action class or this is a model from where we have to get the data. I mean, it's already, once you have created a bean object, once you have invoked an action object, the details are already pre-populated, okay, in the on the stack, and now you just need a way to get data from the stack. So to get data from the stack for the objects for the attributes which are there for the action class, you need not specify the name of the action class. You can directly say I want the first name, I want the last name, I want the user name. But in case you are using specific beans, the other beans which are there, in that case you have to go and specify the bean name dot the attribute name. And if you remember, this is the way in which it was done in the date tag. In the date tag SQL date, the name was person.birthday. So person was a Java bean, birthday was the attribute inside this person, and this data was present on the value stack. Okay, so whenever you are creating a bean, the data goes in the value stack. After that, it's available for you to retrieve data from there. All right, now, yeah, so that's how it is. Now this am I clear till now? Did you guys understand? Guys, did you understand? Others, did you understand? Do you want me to repeat it once more, or like, I mean, you just need some time? Let me know. Okay, but do you guys want me to repeat it from my side as well? Okay, we can move forward. Okay. Okay, so let's move forward. So this action context map basically stores all this data. Okay, so any application scoped variables, the thing is that any variable which can be used within an application is available here. So that basically means that I mean anything which is for the application scope, whatever details you have set inside the JSP using the tag, etc., that is available. If you have any attribute which is set on the session, that is HTTP servlet session object, which you can get from the request as well using request.get session. All the session variables are available here. Okay, root slash value stack, all the action variables, that is from the action class, whatever are the variables, they are present by default. Okay, on this stack. So you can just mention it, you can just refer to it as first name, you can just refer to it as last name. You need not specify that this is from the action class, because the way in which it checks is first checks whether any attribute of this name is there in the action class or not, and after that it doesn't default as such. Okay, thing is that to get data from the session, you have to write session dot in the attribute name. So in that way you have to give the specific data, so request dot you have to use. Okay, so you have to qualify that attribute name is something. If it is not qualified, it means that that particular data is present on the action class and it has to fetch details from there. Got it? So all these attributes are available on the the value stack, all the application scoped variables, all the session scoped variables, all the data which is set in the session, all the data which is set in the request, which basically means request and request parameters, and all the attributes which are set on the request, session, and the application. Okay, so all this data will be set there. Now, again, as I was saying, action object is always available, that is by default. I mean, if it has properties x and y, it is readily available. And for objects in the action class, you need to use a pound symbol, but not required in case of in case of action classes. Okay, but in other cases you do need it. So if you say s property value is equal to name, it's fine. You can also use s property value is equal to hash name. But anyways, if you give name as like this, it is always going to go and fetch details from the respective, from the related action class itself. It's not going to go somewhere else. I think that should be clear. Okay. Now, if you want to retrieve any attribute in the session, as I was saying, it has to be qualified by the name. So here it is, like say hash session.login. So it means that there is some property which is existing on the there's some existing session variable which is out there. We need to get the values. So if you write like hash session.login, it is not going to find in any other scope, but only in the session scope. So even if the login attribute is there in the action class, it will not be used. It will only search in the session. Now these are individual property names, like say storing first name, last name, etc. But the OGNL as such, the object graph notification language as such, supports other things as well, right? So it supports collections, because it might be the case that you want to display multiple customers multiple times, right? So if you want to click on submit and get the details of all the students who are uh, within a particular professor, and there can be 10 or 50 students, you want to repeat a section of code in your JSP page. So for that you need the collection object, right? So you need a list in this particular case. Okay, so you need a list in this particular case, but there are scenarios where you can need a set as well, you can need a map as well. So OGNL, the object graph notification language, what we're discussing here, it supports dealing with collections. Okay, it supports collections, and how we're just going to see right now. Okay, so this tag we have name, and remember we use the list there to give male and female. Similarly, directly write list red, yellow, green. So it means that there has to be a drop down, there has to be the drop down, and it has three values. So this is how you put in the list. Okay, so I mean this is how it is out there. Let's see values, and for similarly you have support for other stuff as well, like set, it has support for map, etc. So the idea is that like whatever data structure is available, OGNL supports it as well, so that you don't have to like work with OGNL, work with struts tags, and then use something else uh, for some of the other items. So it basically supports all kinds of data structures. So collections plus string plus all the boolean, all these things is supported. So if it is supported, then it is taken care of. Okay, now let's see this action class which we have, and for now let's not concentrate on this extends action support. We are going to go into detail of it. Basically it's required for validation, etc., and it is by default action class. So we don't define anything, action support is used. It implements some of the interfaces by default, but that is not the point which I am trying to bring home here. I'm trying to give you some other example. Okay, so the example is how do I set value in the uh, context. So if you have this attribute like say name, this name attribute will be available by default. You do not need to set it on the value stack. But if you want to set some value which is different, which is not one of the attributes defined in the action class, then how do you do it? The way to do it obviously is to get a reference to the value stack, the actual value stack where the details are stored in the form of key value pairs. The way to do is the action context class is there. It is a static class. This method get context is static inside action context, so you don't have to instantiate it directly. You can do action context dot get context, and it gets you the action context instance. From there you can get the value stack. Okay, so action context dot get context gets you the instance of the action context. From there, using get value stack, you get the reference to the actual value stack where the details are stored, and you can manipulate it to store details on it. Okay, so we see what they're doing is in this stack we're pushing this context, right? We're pushing what? We're pushing basically a map, and this map is nothing but a map of key value pairs. So you push a key 1, you push a key 2. Okay, now the thing is that this key 1 and key 2 is available on the like in your GSP page, so it is available. Okay, and the way to achieve or way to get this data is not with only with name hash key 1 or hash key 2. The name here would be hash the name here would be like you have to get this particular key, right? So I think this key would be available because it is here. Yeah, so here I think it's fine because it is there in the it's there directly inside action class, so it's okay. But in other cases you need to like actually predefine it. Use if you're using a different bean, you need to predefine it. So that's how you put values on the context. Okay, and once doing the value in the context is done, you do a stack dot push to push those values, and once pushing the value is done, you return this success string, and this success string again it takes care of uh, like rendering the prepared JSP. So the adds an action to the top, so it basically means that action attributes of the action class is the first to be checked. Okay, now again if you use s-colon if the value is already present in the value stack, okay, or if you want to put it, then you can use s-colon property tag to access the values, and to put it you can put it like directly. If you set from the action class, you can do it. You can do it by the way in which I described above, so all those things are possible. So again, to come back, see here, so this thing is key 1. See, we do not require a specific name here. Why? Because it is used directly. We are setting the value directly using key 1, so that is being used, And I mean for we are basically found a way to use struts in the same way as it would have used the attributes which are directly inside the action class. Alright, so it uses those key value pairs, and you are defining your name, you're defining your key 1, you're defining your key 2, and entering these values. So if you see here and just forget about the action class, and if you just see this one and understand, uh, I do not have anything mentioned here. There's any data mentioned here. So where does it get the data from? So it gets the data from the value stack, and by default it gets the data from whatever you have set in the action class, because that is there on the top of the stack. So it will be checked first to see if any of the value matches with the data which is there on the stack. Okay, so that's how it gets done, and you render the values. Okay. This again, I mean, this is old form tag, etc. If you would have done before, there is nothing specific to what do you say, to struts tag here. And again, you have the struts XML tag where you define all these action classes, etc. And nothing more. Again, I mean, for that particular JSP, I put the entire thing here, so that again you have a reference. So the thing is that if you do the same thing again and again, and you will get a hang of it. So that's why I put it again. So inside the struts, you have defined the package name, again action, and again in web.xml you have put that filter. And again, if you see here, we've used org apache struts to dispatcher filter dispatcher. This is an old class. Right now the class has changed. It struts prepare and execute action filter. So any of the work which you do, try to use that one. I mean, this is not used going forward, but there is obviously support for it, but it's not used as such. And this is how it is. So it was for the same where we're getting the name key value pairs, right? So you put your name, and I mean those key value pairs there, and if you print the size just to see what are the values which are there in the stack, there are 3 values. Why? Because you have this name attribute by default, because it is there in the action class, you are setting that value. Then you have this key 1 and key 2, which you are setting by getting the reference to the action context. So in the value stack, now you have 3 objects. Okay, that's where the size is 3. Guys, is it clear till now? Guys, is it clear till now? Others? Arti, what would you? Raghav, Suhas, Padmakar, Arti? Do you want me to repeat? Okay. So, can I move ahead, or like you guys any prior commitments, because it's already more time than I mean we usually go for.
Yeah, so can we continue in the next class?
Yeah, sure. So next class will deal from Struts Tag libraries. If you guys can use a Struts Tag and complete the assignment which was there from beforehand, then it would be great. Okay. Yeah, sure, sure. Okay, then yeah, sure. Work on it and then I mean get back to me. Okay, but please, I mean it's my earnest request